So if you want to try out the CSI Linux bootable version and copy it to an external or secondary hard drive, you can download that file directly from csilinux.com/download.html. It comes in a few different file formats you can download from. Once it's downloaded, you should see a 7-zip. You're going to have to install 7-zip to extract it. Once it's extracted, it's going to blow out about 58 gig drive. So that's a forensic image of a bootable CSI Linux. So this does take a little bit of time. So what we're going to do is do a quick time lapse and just make sure that again we do see the DD file. That's great. So we're going to speed this up real quick because this takes about 15 or so minutes, or at least on our system. And the system we're using is a smaller laptop with 8 gig. It has internal SSD drive, and that's running Windows 10. And then the second drive we have is 250 gig SSD as well. And that's going to be a Seagate drive. So now once it's exploded, we should see the DD file. That's what we're going to copy, and the HDD raw copy. You run that as admin because you're going to need admin rights. We're going to do file for the source and make sure you pick the DD file. No other file, it has to be the DD. You'll see a couple other files in that folder that you exploded on. The 7-zip will not work. You have to do the DD because that's the forensic copy of the drive. That's a common mistake a lot of people do, but choose DD and hit OK. And then just verify that it's raw and then it's the DD file. And hit continue. What you just did was created the source. Now we're going for the target or the destination. So we're going to choose here the Seagate SSD at the very top. Again, it's a 250 gig drive. Again, hit continue. And we actually purposely made it to where it is being opened by another folder that's not on the screen. So we're trying to generate the error. So right here, just verify that the source is DD, destination is SD. Going to hit OK or yes. And it says, awesome, unable to lock device. This is a problem some people have experienced before. So what we're going to do is walk through the process of fixing that. If you don't get that, that's great. But if you do, it's a relatively simple fix. So right click on this PC, left click on manage, and then we're going to go to disk management and just verify the disk is being seen, which the other tool did. So we have disk 1, that's going to be the system with Windows installed on it. Disk 0 is the one we want to use. So we're going to clean it up. We're going to delete the volumes, make sure that, again, nothing else can be using it. It says active partition, that's fine. So now this is an unallocated 250 gig drive. And just verify it, that's great. Go and close out of the window. Now let's run raw copy again, same principle. Source. Make sure the DD's chosen. Hit OK. Then continue. And then at target, just make sure the drive is chosen again. Then hit continue. And then start. And then yes to verify. So again, this is time-lapsed, but we are copying the DD file, which is the forensic copy, onto that external drive. Once this is done, we just want to do one quick step to verify that the system sees the contents that were copied over. So this took about another 20 minutes. Task complete. And then close out of HD raw copy. So now again, what you're going to want to do is just verify. So right click on this PC and then manage. Then go to the disks, so disk management. And as we can see now, it has a 58 gig and 170 some odd unallocated, which is great. So go and reboot. Once you reboot, you need to go into the BIOS, either reboot or shut down. So once you're in the BIOS, make sure that it sees the drive and that it can boot. Once it does boot, you should be able to get into CSI Linux. What we're going to do is prep that drive. So you can prep it by going to sudo gparted, and then we see with the ext4 system, you can increase the size, and you can make it whatever size that you want. Relatively easy. You can either slide the bar or do the math and put the numbers in. But we're not going to do that, so cancel. We're going to use this unallocated space as a drive that we can share information from disk to disk, or operating from operating system. So sometimes Windows does have an issue with Linux creating an NTFS partition. So what we're going to use is FAT32. If we can change it to NTFS once we're on Windows, just to make sure it's both compatible with systems. But right now, starting off with FAT32, we're going to name it as data, and then just check it and let it do its thing. It's actually pretty quick. We'll go and hit close. And then we can see that it has been verified. Double click on it just to make sure we can get into it. And it looks like it's good to go. So we're going to put a file on here and see if we can see it in Windows. Now, one last thing before we do anything else, I want to be able to dual boot off disk 1 or disk 0. So we're going to do sudo and then update-grub. This should list and identify any other system that's bootable, and it sees our Windows 10 on SDB1. That's great. So now at this point, just reboot the system, and if you're still booting up off the CSI Linux system, you should now see both. But we're going to do a quick power up since we're in here. This is going to update everything, and this is going to force a reboot anyway. This update can take a little bit of time. But again, once it's done, it'll reboot, and we'll see if we can see both systems on the grub. So now we're into Windows. We just verified. We were able to copy the file over, which is good. I put a couple more on right before the reboot. So I'm going to delete it. And the reason I'm going to reformat this is because I think I might have some files larger than 4 gig. So we're just going to force it into NTFS. Once it's done here, same basic principle, you just go back to the other system, verify, and it should be good to go. Let's go to disk management. We want to make sure that everything copied okay. So D drive, NTFS, we're good. Going to copy another file over just to make sure that we can see it on the other side. Now at this point you can reboot in CSI Linux, verify a few things, but the steps we just went through today were to test the basic ways to copy over the DD file onto another hard drive, and then a troubleshooting method. But just make sure that when you copy the content, you are using the DD file, not the 7Z file. A lot of people that are not able to boot up are copying the wrong file over. You also need to make sure that the BIOS of the system knows how to look at the drive, can see the drive. And then you boot up off that secondary drive. But if you can boot up off a USB or any other external drive, you shouldn't have any problems with booting up off CSI Linux.